Hello and welcome back to the BSD YouTube show. As always, your host Patrick Kerbler, and tonight, as always, I am joined by Tim and Jarrett. Tim and Jarrett. It's been a while since we talked, but since then, it's been pretty quiet around Penn State football. After the race that was the transfer portal, Penn State basically has they have their roster set outside of maybe one or two 2026 kids climbing on boards, or somebody in the transfer portal deciding to come on late. Although at this point, classes have been going on for a little bit while, so I don't know how they would make that work. But news that we do have to share and what will be the focus of our show tonight: the Big Ten finally decided to release the 2026 schedule. So I'll throw it to you guys, Tim, and I'll bring up a picture of the schedule for those that are watching to follow along as well. Tim, we'll start with you. What is I don't want to say like the biggest stretch, but the big games on the schedule? Because the big talking point, at least that I have seen, is that Penn State has a super easy schedule, but that does not come without tough stretches. So where do we see the toughest stretches for this Penn State 2026 campaign?
I mean, I guess you want to point out the obvious tough stretch is that 2-game stretch in mid-October when they host USC, which I believe will be a night game, whiteout. I can get more into that in a little bit on why I think that's the case, but get USC at home and then you go on the road to Michigan the following week. So ideally, if Penn State's gonna have a memorable first season under Matt Campbell, flirt with or make the playoffs, they're gonna have to get a split in those games, preferably beat USC at home, because losing the whiteout just sucks, as we saw last year. Excuse me. But Michigan, they're kind of like with Penn State. They do return some key players, and I do think Kyle Whittingham's a solid coach, much like Matt Campbell, but also a bit of an unknown in some ways. But winning in Ann Arbor is never an easy thing, so that's the toughest stretch. I also say that trip to Seattle to play Washington and first Saturday in November is gonna also be a tough one. Even though I do wonder where Washington will be at that point. I don't know if you guys have been following the whole Damon Williams saga.
Who's Damon Williams? Never heard of him.
I see what you did there, Pat. If you don't know, Damon Williams, starting quarterback last year for Washington, he originally said he was going to stay put for another year with the Huskies and not hit the transfer portal. And then just a few days after saying that, he announces that he's going into the transfer portal. And that led to some legal actions to keep him around, and ultimately is sticking around with Washington. But I have to imagine how awkward it's got to be right now to be in his shoes and be around teammates who were originally trying to bail on. I'm sure that won't have any effect on team chemistry or how they perform on the field this coming year. But regardless, it's a cross-country trip, as we saw last year, especially at UCLA, and even the year before that at USC. Those cross-country games tend to be pretty difficult. So I'm also marking that one as well.
So, Jarrett, I think, everyone is basically in agreement that those are the big three games, right? Hosting USC, going to Michigan, and then going to Washington. Which of those three games, if you could, let's say that we could take one of them off the schedule and in their place schedule, try Michigan State at home, right? A team that I think Michigan State will be pretty solid. I think Pat Fitzgerald's doing pretty good. But if we could take one of those games and instead play Michigan State or play Cincinnati or play Kentucky or play Boston College or whoever you want to put in there, which of those games do you think is toughest? Because I have a pretty strong answer on this, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn between, the three main ones that we've been talking about. USC's at home, and I'm expecting that to be a whiteout. Well, that's an automatic win, as we're, well aware of. And at Michigan is going to be tough just because the way it comes with the schedule, and obviously the road trip to Washington is never easy. I will, so to pick one, I will say that the game with Michigan, just because that's going to be on the road. That's the 7th week, and it's before the bye week. So by then they'll be really in the drudgery of the season, the weekly grind, and there's a chance I'm sure there'll be some bumps and bruises and guys playing through injuries and things like that who will really be looking forward to the bye week to heal up a little bit. So I think the trip to Michigan may be the most challenging.
I think it's Washington. I think this is like the perfect time that Jed Fish usually gets. When we saw him in Arizona, it was kind of in between that second and third year that he really got things going. And that's what we're at with Washington as well. That was a big undertaking, taking over Washington. Yes, he was taking over a team a couple of years ago that was just in the national title game, but it was a heavy senior-laden roster that lost a ton to the NFL and then lost a whole bunch of other guys to Alabama and a bunch of other places as well. So it was a bit of a slow build for him, but going to his third season at Washington, I feel like they've done a pretty good job of recruiting, pretty good job of retention. And Tim, you mentioned Damon Williams. Listen, yes, he kind of tried to leave at the end in somewhat poor fashion, but I think that we have to understand in this day and age of college football, those things are just going to happen. And at the end of the day, Damon Williams, whether it is because legally he felt like he wasn't going to be able to go or whatever it might be, he is back at Washington. I think that'll be okay and things will work itself out. And more than anything, I just think he's a super talented quarterback. I've been seeing some top 10 quarterback rankings just, for guys coming back, just because it's, Julian Saints and the Dante Moores and the Arch Mannings, these big names. But I really think that Damon Williams, if I had to pick a sleeper Heisman guy, it would be Damon Williams. So that game really scares me just because of what I think Washington will be. But it also scares me because, Tim, like you said, going to Seattle that's an extremely difficult place to play. I think it is called Husky Stadium.
Husky Stadium.
Correct. Right, going to Husky Stadium is an incredibly tough place to play, especially if you're playing a good Washington team. And yeah, just the added effect of flying from State College, or I guess not flying from State College, but flying from Harrisburg or wherever they're able to get to, going all the way.
They're still working on lengthening that runway at State College Airport, Pat. So
James is still working on it. He's coming in as a consultant for Matt Campbell to continue his life mission of improving State College's airport. So
yeah, I would say though Husky Stadium, in my opinion, is probably the most underrated home atmosphere in college football. At least it's very close to the top of the list. If there's someone else I'm not thinking of, because it doesn't typically come in mind when you think of really difficult atmospheres to play in. But I mean, they are very, very good at home. Even when some down years, they're still very tough to beat there. It's a very loud stadium, and in November it's probably going to be very cold and wet that day too. Whether they play at night or afternoon, whatever the time of kickoff may be, we'll find out. But yeah, the conditions may be something else to consider as well on top of that cross country trip.
That is going to be a big part of it as well. You mentioned the kickoff times and stuff like that. Okay, we do have this, the schedule is finalized in the sense that we know who Penn State is playing on what dates, but we don't know exactly when. And Tim, you mentioned before that USC will be a primetime. Did you say primetime whiteout or just the whiteout?
I think it'll be prime time. I'll get into it right now. So as those of you who don't know, the way it works on how Fox, NBC, CBS, how they divvy up the game. So they do a draft, and Fox gets the first 3 draft picks, and you don't pick by game, but you do pick by week. So Fox have the first 3 picks. They always use their first pick on week 13. That's the last week of the regular season. That's going to be Ohio State, Michigan. So they always get that for the first pick. And then I would imagine their second pick is going to be Ohio State at Indiana. That's week 7. That's the same week that Penn State plays at Michigan. And then for their third pick, week 10, Oregon plays at Ohio State. So I could see them taking that. Also, week 2, Oklahoma goes to Michigan. they may, maybe they might be interested in grabbing a marquee early September game there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd be shocked if one of their first 3 picks was week 6, which is when USC plays Penn State. I think that will be either CBS or NBC grabs that. And even if CBS gets that, they do occasionally air night games. So whichever non-Fox network gets that, I think that's going to it would end up being a primetime game.
Has CBS done a night game while NBC has had? Because now I'm trying to.
Yes, they did the Iowa whiteout game.
That was before. Wasn't that before NBC's? Or
no, NBC did have. NBC did have a night. They were. That was the first year of NBC's.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. Because West Virginia game was NBC. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean that's the network stuff. Like I know there's also a lot of politics to it as well. And like Fox is, like you said, Tim, like they're picking those first 3 games, but I do know there can be like swaps and stuff like that. The nice added effect of Indiana winning the national title though, is that like, it does kick Penn State down a couple pegs when it comes to, some of these where teams are getting, or where like the weeks are getting drafted by the networks. And Indiana plays Ohio State. Does Indiana also play Oregon again this year?
I don't think so, but I did see they get Michigan.
They must get Michigan and USC then. Either way, point being that Indiana, not that they didn't have a tough schedule this last year. I mean, they went to Penn State and they went to Oregon. I'd say that's hardly easy, and they went to Iowa, by the way, which is tough as well. But Indiana certainly has become more of like a name, just being the defending national champions that, I think Fox will be more enticed.
Indiana at Michigan on October 24th. That's week 8. So that's another possible like top 3 pick for them.
Yeah. So that certainly helps. I mean, I know that we've seen like the West Coast teams, like UCLA when UCLA came to Penn State, they did a big noon kickoff, but I do think they're trying to stay away from having the USCs, the Oregons do the big noon kickoffs when they're flying all the way east, just body clockwise and stuff like that. So hopefully that will help, because man, it would be nice to have that USC be a night game, because if not, say that USC is not a night game, what do we think? And this can kind of help us, talk about some of the other games that we have here. Outside of those top 3 games, where else are we looking on the schedule as far as, dangerous spots or potentially big games, or maybe teams that we think are sneakily underrated just because, I don't know, right? You can look at a schedule now and say like, oh, these are your toughest games, but even look at Penn State last year. What did we talk about all last offseason? It was a 2-game schedule for Penn State. It was Oregon and it was Ohio State. You know who we didn't mention in that? The national freaking champions, Indiana, 16-0. So you never know, and not to say that there is, Minnesota is going to win a national championship or anything, but outside of those 3 games, because I think that's going to get most of the talking points. Jarrett, we'll kick to you. What games kind of stick out to you? Either one game or 2 games that you're kind of circling as, a couple games or under the radar games.
Yeah, a couple that are under the radar. I definitely say at Northwestern, just because under David Braun, Northwestern's done really well, just playing at the level of the competition. So
they're a real stadium too now. It's not.
Yeah, that is true as well. So it's actually I was going to say it's the first Big Ten road trip, because they do play at Temple in week 2. But yeah, I mean, Northwestern.
That's not much of a road trip, Jared.
Yeah, but Northwestern is.
Yeah, Penn State has never lost at Temple before. We all know that.
Yeah, but I mean, Northwestern is just a scrappy team. They play good defense. They try to play ball control, and just kind of they do what teams do to upset teams that are a little bit overmatched against them, or that they're the ones overmatched, I should say. But another thing with Northwestern too is they added Chip Kelly over the offseason, so I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out, because I mean the last few years they've played very good defense and they've just had a pretty lackluster offense. So see what type of juice he can bring to the offense. If they can be a little more productive, they could be dangerous. The other one too is Minnesota. I know Minnesota's a little bit different playing on the road versus at Penn State historically. They haven't had as many problems with them, but we know that they're a very well coached team. They play very hard under PJ Fleck, and it's going to be a week after that road trip at Washington. So, that's going to be a little bit of a grueling week to travel back and get ready to play another pretty physical team after, playing at Washington, who we all agree, I think are going to be pretty good and could be a dark horse in the Big Ten. So, yeah, those are the two that I'm circling that I think, aren't necessarily the biggest games of the year and aren't, going to get a whole lot of attention, at least right now nationally, but I think they could be two pretty tricky danger spots for Penn State.
I guess the only other game that maybe you could circle for potential problem is Wisconsin, but that would take like some real leaps in assumption that they just absolutely killed it in the transfer portal.
Which they did do a nice job. They did solid. They got Old Dominion's quarterback Colton Joseph. They got Iowa State's running back Abu Samu. That was actually going to be my pick, but anyway, Tim.
They did get some guys, but still, I'm not sold. I just don't think it's going to work out with Luke Fickell there. I think he's going to get fired after next year, or I guess they don't actually fire at the end of the seasons anymore. He'll get fired sometime mid-season when they're like 2-5 again and headed towards another losing season.
I kind of wonder if Luke Fickell's around just because there were so many other big programs that canned their coaches this past year that they said, we don't really want to, this is not a good year for us to join.
That's my thinking, Jared.
That was my theory with all that.
They want to know part of that coaching carousel last year.
Yeah. But, to be fair to Fickell, Wisconsin did show some signs of life towards the end of the season. So, maybe he is starting to turn a corner there. I mean, obviously he's got a great track record. I'm not convinced it's going to work out there. I'm probably more agreeable to you, Tim, that he won't, be the Badgers coach in 2027. But, to your point, they showed some signs of life and showed some pretty marked improvement towards the second half of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how they look at the beginning of the year.
So that's a game you absolutely got to win.
Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland doesn't scare anyone.
Purdue, no. I know they're going through a pretty major rebuild.
That's the thing. Purdue could be a 6-6 team for all I know next year.
Yeah, they got a lot of work cut out for them. I mean, heck, Rutgers almost. I mean, after Penn State really, started playing motivated football and kind of got some stuff together, Rutgers really gave them a scare. And I mean, if it wasn't for the ball flying out of I can never remember his last name, but the Rutgers quarterback. Thank you. The ball just kind of just like kind of a fluke play where the ball flew out of his hands and Amari Campbell was able to scoop it up and race off.
The most Rutgers thing you can imagine.
Yeah, they may have lost that game, so you never know. And at Maryland, I don't know. Maryland's just one of those teams that always looks good and always looks like they have some potential at the start of the season.
But it's at the end of the season, Jared. You're going to get November Maryland.
So that's why I'm not terribly concerned.
Yeah, Maryland also, I can't think of any close game that Penn State has played with Maryland at Maryland. They played in the Raven Stadium.
That was a close one. That was very,
I was at that one.
Second year, I think.
Yeah, that was a nail biter. I was at that game.
I think they won 31-30, I want to say.
I was going to say all the other ones have been, basically blowouts. 2021, I guess, was a little bit hairy, and you needed a.
That was kind of close. That was a tight game. I think it was
going into the fourth quarter. It was.
I think it was tied in the fourth quarter.
That was the Jahan Dotson game, correct?
Then Jahan Dotson. He was having a great game. He was going off the whole game, but then he came up with a big play for a touchdown, I think, and
I think they had a pick 6 too towards the end.
Yeah, at the end, but they were up by I think couple scores at that point, but that pick 6 basically shut the door on any comeback.
Do we have any concerns or complaints? I guess is better than concerns. I just saw, the standard as a Penn State fan, you see the schedule and it's like, oh, of course, our 2 toughest games, USC, Michigan back to back, no bye week. Do we actually have any complaints about that? Because I personally maybe I'm just jaded by the last guy, but it felt like it didn't actually freaking matter at all if we had a bye before a big game or after a big game or whatever it was.
Here's the thing:
we had a bye going to Ohio State or played UMass going to Ohio State, and it didn't matter at all. And I know Matt Campbell's different, but I actually kind of like that those games are back to back, and you get the bye after as a reset.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. And here's the thing: Penn State is they missed Ohio State, Oregon, and Indiana. So if all of those three are wiped off the schedule, then USC and Michigan back to back is no big deal. And by no big deal, I mean not like I expect Penn State to like go out and like easily win those games or anything like that. I just mean no big deal as in, compared to what it could be. It could be Oregon, Ohio State back to back, or Indiana, Ohio State 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
Before we talk about the rest of the schedule, or kind of go through the schedule, I'm going to put you guys on the spot, and we're going to pick game by game. What are we, 8 months out? So get ready. Just want to say, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We were at 692 last time I checked. We're getting to 700. We are getting to 700. So please subscribe as we continue our climb, our march to 1,000 subscribers. Helps us out a ton. Make sure you are liking the videos as well. And as always, my plea, Apple, Spotify listeners, there's hundreds of you out there. I actually have to check Apple. I don't know how many people are rating on Apple. I continue to be the only Spotify rating that we have, which, come on, there's hundreds of you. Hundreds of us. There's hundreds of us. Please like, and I don't think you can like on Spotify, but make sure that you're giving us a 5-star rating. So that would help out a ton. So do all those things, keep supporting us, and we'll keep putting out videos throughout the entire off season. We have some things in the works, nothing that I want to talk about yet, but we'll be having things, probably, I won't say weekly necessarily, just because, no offense, guys, we can only talk about this team so often when it's like April 4th and we're on our, 17th week of the offseason, but we'll definitely be coming, every other week to give some Penn State content as we go through this offseason. So appreciate the support as always. And
to add to that, we're currently working on a little offseason series that will be rolling out during the long off season, which I think you guys are going to enjoy.
It'll be fun. I wrote an article in 2023 that was the basis of this, and that's all I'll say. So, all right, let's start. Marshall, September 5th. Tim, give me your score prediction. Okay, we don't need score predictions, but I assume that we have Penn State. We all have Penn State beating Marshall. Yes.
Yes.
What happens if Marshall beats Penn State? Because if we go back, let's go back in time. James Franklin almost lost his season opener. Now, granted, it is against Central Florida in Ireland, a little bit different. Bill O'Brien loses his season opener against Ohio. I don't know what happens to Joe Paterno, but right. So season openers are career openers for these head coaches at Penn State. Not always the easiest. So are we worried at all about Marshall?
I'm not. I mean, I haven't looked into, how good or bad Marshall is supposed to be.
What are you doing with your offseason? It's already January 28th. You haven't looked into Marshall yet?
But look, that being said, regardless how good Marshall is expected to be, I mean, this is much different Penn State program that Matt Campbell is inheriting compared to Franklin and O'Brien. Obviously O'Brien was dealing with spent the whole summer trying to keep the team together after the sanctions came down, and
still less transfers though. Still less transfers, just saying.
Yeah, and then Franklin, also was dealing with sanctions too. I mean, not having to keep a team together, but he inherited a roster at the nadir of the sanctions in terms of scholarship players available. So, there was an adjustment period with that. And, and of course there's the obvious adjustments with any first year head coach, but I do think, Campbell's a very experienced guy, spent 10 years at Iowa State, 3 or 4 years at Toledo before that as head coach. The guy knows what he's doing. And he's also, it's different areas. He's brought in a lot of his guys, coaches and also players from Iowa State that he trusts. And I just think this is a squad that there will be, the usual like adjustments and maybe some growing pains, but it won't quite be on the scale level that you might otherwise have because of the number of people he's brought from Iowa State with him. So I think they should be able to handle Marshall without too much trouble. I'm thinking like a, maybe 17 to 24 point win in the end.
All right, you heard it here first. Penn State wins by 3 scores, at least 3 scores, according to Tim Aiden.
At least 3 scores.
And I'll say to answer your question, Pat, that Campbell's he was a very popular hire, I would say, among the Penn State fan base. So a lot of goodwill heading the season. But to answer your question, if they do somehow find a way to lose to Marshall, all that goodwill is going to go out the window very quickly. So for his sake, hopefully he can hang on to that, because I do think people will be somewhat patient with him. But losing a game to Marshall to start off your career here would quickly lose that.
What about Temple? And I made the joke earlier. Last time Penn State went to Temple in 2015, they lost, and maybe the most embarrassing game of the Franklin era. I mean, that Temple team ended up being actually like one of the better Group of 5 teams, but I mean, I guess there were some big blowouts to Michigan State and Michigan, but that Temple loss felt pretty close to rock bottom.
It probably had the most embarrassing play for sure of the Franklin era when Temple got a sack on a 2-man rush.
Good times.
Never forget that.
Any worries about this Temple team? Actually, I like Temple. I like Casey Killer. I think he's talking about a guy who, if he does his career like 10 times over, like what he did at Delaware, and the fact that he was never really able to parlay that into a power gig, it doesn't make any sense to me. But he's now in his 60s, going to his second season at Temple, and I thought did actually a pretty good job at Temple in his first season. So wouldn't be shocked if Temple ends up being like a 7-5, 8-4 team. They actually took quite a few Penn State transfers, Jackson Smolak being one of them. So any worries about Temple or any worries about Buffalo? Or are we thinking 3-0 in the out of conference?
They should win those games. I mean, maybe Temple could be a little feisty, who knows, but like you said,
what do we think the crowd is like at Temple as far as Penn State versus Temple fans?
I think it's majority Penn State fans.
Yeah, I'd say at least 60-40 Penn State, maybe even more than that.
Yeah, I would think it's probably. I mean, Temple's a big school, so that's, even though Temple's not exactly packing the link, I do think that they would get out for a Penn State game. So we'll see. It's been a while. It's nice to get this back on the docket. I like give me at least one, as someone who lives 25 minutes away from Temple. I love the idea. Maybe a little bit farther away, maybe more like 35 minutes. Either way, as the right outside of Philly guy, I love the idea of playing at Temple at least once every. I would like it once every 5 years, but I'll take once every decade. I unfortunately have a wedding this weekend, so shout out to that wedding who's ruining my tailgating plans at Temple. All right, Wisconsin.
All weddings, man.
Do we think that Penn State beats Wisconsin?
I'd say yes, but I don't think it's a guarantee, just because what I mentioned earlier with Wisconsin showing some signs of life towards the end of the season. I think Penn State should be fine at home to beat them, just compared to what the rosters are going to look like heading the season. But I wouldn't be absolutely stunned if Wisconsin manages to go in there and win that game.
Tim, what about Northwestern? Scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Penn State's likely to lose this game, 1 being Penn State's absolutely winning this game. Where do we fall with Northwestern?
I put it at a 4 or 5. I think Penn State they're a more talented team than Northwestern. I mean, they pretty much always are. But if you saw last year, when they beat us at Beaver Stadium and ended James Franklin's career with that win. I mean, you never know. That could. They haven't announced when their first game will be at their new Ryan Field. It could be when they host Penn State, and oh boy, if we're the very first team to play in a new Ryan Field, damn well they're gonna, get a good crowd for that. But I think Penn State fans will turn out pretty good, those that are in the Chicagoland area and other nearby spots Midwest. But I think you're gonna have a more focused, better coach team, just better.
I
QB
love your
play.
in-depth analysis. What's out?
I mean, it's just like I think I can't see Lightning striking twice. Okay, I think Penn State's gonna win that game. It won't be easy. It's on the road.
Has
Could
Penn
be
State ever lost to Northwestern? Oh yeah, they lost in 20.
Oh yeah, they've lost at Northwestern
a few times. Yeah, I remember they lost back
2014 though.
We'll go back to the 90s hour, but they lost when Wally Richardson was Penn State's quarterback. I want to say 96.
Oh, that was the year 90. That's when they went to the Rose Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Darnell Autry running all over people. Pat Fitzgerald was their star linebacker.
And then there was also the loss, and you may have mentioned this already. Was it the 2014? One of Franklin's first seasons when he forgot.
Actually, 14 and 15.
Timeouts. Yeah, he let them bleed the clock and then kicked the game-winning field goal.
Yeah, I'm saying losses at Northwestern.
At Northwestern, sorry.
2015 was the at Northwestern. Yes, I know there's been some weird goods with Northwestern though, but anyway, continuing on, we're spending way too much time on all these. USC.
Yeah, I put it at a 4 or 5. I think Penn State will win, but I still it's far from a guarantee. So
all right, count of 3. We're gonna say, do we think Penn State beats USC? Yes or no? 1, 2, 3.
No.
Yes.
Michigan. 1, 2, 3.
No.
No.
Purdue. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
Yes.
I assume we don't lose the bye week. There's no scandals or anything this go around. You just never know with Penn State. Washington. Does Penn State beat Washington?
I'm gonna have to give the edge to the Huskies for now. Here in January 28th.
I mean, that makes sense, but I don't know. I got a feeling they pull that one off. And I'm just not. I think Washington can be very good. I'm just not certain how I'm feeling about them right now. I know Williams is coming back, but they're also losing Boston and some other pretty significant pieces on their offense. So I'll just be optimistic now and say Penn State.
Okay. I assume Minnesota, we're predicting as a win, but as we mentioned before, think that's a bit of a...
I think that has some real rock fight potential.
Yeah, I can see that definitely going either way.
And then Rutgers and Maryland thinking that's a win. So where to take this full circle, as we have probably confused everyone with our going back and forth. If you had to pick right now, and listen, hand up, this is like the stupidest conversation in the world. It's January 28th. This is just what we're doing. We're just going over the schedule. I feel like it makes sense. We have to say what we think is the most likely record prediction for Penn State, while realizing that this 50% of the roster is brand stinking new. Like, who knows what Penn State is going to look like on September 5th versus what they're going to look like on November 21st. So just want to get that out there. We can change our minds. We will probably change our minds. But where do you think Penn State finishes, Jarrett, record-wise? If you had to put money on one of the outcomes.
You mean overall record?
Yeah, overall record.
I'd say 9-3. Just looking at this, I do think they got a little bit lucky with the schedule this year. Again, missing Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon, which I think are going to be the 3 best teams in the Big Ten once again. I think Oregon may head into season number 1. At the very least, they'll probably be top 3 now that Dante Moore is coming back, and they have so much, returning talent and around him. So I think they got lucky with the schedule for sure. But the thing that is kind of my hang up, my big concern is just I don't know how good Penn State's going to be in the line of scrimmage, both on offense and defense. So, you have a defensive line that's kind of, not up to snuff compared to what Penn State's been, over the last 10, 15, 20 years. That's always been a really strong point of the team, one of the biggest strengths. But you might get into a rock fight with Minnesota or Northwestern where the defense is having a hard time getting off the field and gradually gets worn down. And one of those teams is able to just pull off a couple very long breaking drives. And, maybe you lose a couple games that right now, when we look at the schedule, we're not expecting. So I'll say 9-3, but there can be a huge variance this year because the schedule, maybe everything works out well and they have a great season and heck, maybe win 10, 11 games. Maybe the lines are in rougher shape than even we're expecting right now. And we're looking at a 7-5 season or so. So I think there's a pretty big variance. So I'll say 9-3 is if I had to make a guess at this point, that's what I'm going with.
Tim, same for you. If you had to make a guess on overall record, what do you say? As most likely, realizing that yes, there's such a variance with this team.
I'm feeling 10-2 right now in the moment. I think between the three toughest games I mentioned, USC, Michigan, Washington, I think they get at least one of those, perhaps even maybe two of those three. And I don't know. I guess maybe it's wishful thinking, but they don't get. They find a way to, they don't get tripped up against Wisconsin or Northwestern or Minnesota, or have like a complete WTF type of performance against Purdue or Rutgers or Maryland and lose that like they did to UCLA and Northwestern last year. So I don't know. I'll go 10-2 for now.
As I said, I have the right to change my mind and probably will a lot of times this offseason. I think the 10-2 thing is a little bit unrealistic the more I think about it, just because I like the top end, and this is what we talked about when we talked about them bringing the Iowa State guys and just what they did the transfer portal and retainment. I like Penn State's top 25 guys, top 30 guys. I don't think that they have the depth that we are accustomed to in the past when a cornerback would get hurt, right? Like, AJ Harris, you stink against Northwestern. We're going to put in Darius Dixon now, who's a true freshman, but it's just an absolute stud. I don't know if Penn State's going to have like that type of depth that we have just had with James's recruiting. Yes, it was not top 5 recruiting classes, and in most cases wasn't top 10 recruiting classes, but those consistent top 15-ish classes, and the way that Penn State was able to mostly retain that depth over time, it definitely helped. Like, think back to the 2022 season. You look at the offensive line that started against Purdue on the road I think that was a Thursday night, versus the offensive line that started in the Rose Bowl. Completely different units. You had a true freshman, Drew Sheldon. You had JB Nelson out there. You had, trying to think off the top of my head, I can't think of the other people, but right, they had injuries throughout the year to guys like Fashanu, and they were able to just put in, other guys who came in and played really, really well. I don't know if Penn State necessarily has that leeway this year.
And that's a great point, because once you think about the inevitable injuries that'll occur throughout the year, say, for instance, I'm just throwing this out there. Say Penn State loses their top 2 safeties. That's a position that could get a little dicey. If your top guys aren't on the field, so then you're in a situation where anybody that you're playing that has at least a halfway capable passing game can really find a lot of mismatches and take advantage of that. So I think they're going to need a little bit of luck with injuries, because there's going to be a few position groups that they really can't afford to lose, a lot of their top end players, because there might be a bit of a drop off after that, and something that just produce some weaknesses that teams can really take advantage of.
Yeah, think of 2024 season. Kevin Winston goes down after the first game of the season. Sakeem Wheatley steps up and is, played tremendously well. I'm not going to.
You had Jalen Reed too to step up and play a larger role in Winston's absence, and a guy who's starting in playoff game this year. So
yeah, and I just don't know if they had that, and especially at every single position. Yeah, maybe some like cornerback can still hold up, but specifically on the defensive line and along the offensive line and defensive end in particular. Penn State's going to really be relying on, Max Granville and Yevon Kamaju and, talented young guys, but it's the depth just isn't quite there for what I think will be, inevitable injuries. Maybe Penn State gets lucky and they're able to stay healthy, and they have this health luck that, Indiana, I feel like, has had the last couple of years, and they're just able to withstand it. But I couldn't say
that for a lot of teams nowadays with just the way college football is structured. Because, the days of being able to field like a 3D full of blue chippers that's over. With NIL, guys want to get paid. Somebody who who's like buried in the depth chart, like former 4 or 5-star recruit, doesn't get much playing time, they're going to take their talents elsewhere for bigger bags. So I feel like most teams are in that kind of predicament that you say Penn State's in, with, a couple injuries away from, things getting real dicey.
No, and that's fair, right? Like, yeah, Georgia's 2 deep or 3 deep in 2022 compared to their 2 deep or 3 deep now. Like, yeah, it's night and day. They had, guys that probably could have been on NFL rosters that were on their 2 deep. And the same is the case for Penn State. I just think Penn State is, even weaker than some of those teams. And I'm not even necessarily trying to compare like Penn State to like those teams right now, but more of just like where Penn State has been these past couple of years. And what has been like our normal of generally having good depth, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be the case next year. So we'll see. Again, maybe Penn State gets, I don't want to say Penn State gets lucky. Like maybe the depth is better than I think it is, because
I guess we'll find out with spring practices and how things are going this summer and with fall camp. So plenty of time to figure this out and to change our minds on our predictions if we want.
I was going to say, so long story short, I started this out with saying 10-2 is unrealistic, but I'm going to go 8-4 just because, I don't know. I think if we're going to say like the 10-2 thing, that even means that you win one of USC, Michigan, and Washington, which, okay, I think that's doable, but then that means complete running the table everywhere else. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. And Tim, you kind of mentioned it, just a couple seconds ago with like how the talent has been kind of dispersing everywhere. I mean, look at the playoff this year with Indiana and Texas Tech and Ole Miss, all these teams that haven't made it in the past. I think you are going to see this kind of turn into like an NFL model, the same way that we've seen the college football turn to the NFL model and just like every other aspect. But the idea that like almost every team could beat every other team at play, especially when you talk about power conferences. So we'll see. I'm going to go 8-4 right now. That could change as we research more, think more, and at least for me, talk myself into this team, this roster. I will say, like, I think one of the important things though, this is how we'll end it. Let's say that they do go 10-2. Do you think that this schedule, if Penn State goes 10-2, they are 100% in the playoff?
I wouldn't say 100% with the schedule. It kind of depends how things shake out.
Yeah, not 100%, but I'd say above 50%.
Yeah.
And that actually brings up a thought that I wanted to share. Was the one thing that really irks me with the schedule, and it's like this most years, is Penn State's regular season almost always ends with a whimper. So when you've all these like really high profile matches with a lot of playoff implications, Penn State's got Rutgers and Maryland, we're kind of forgotten about. So I could see a scenario where, everything works out well and they do finish 10-2 and, say Penn State's 9, 10, 11 at the end of the year. There's also a possibility while they're playing Rutgers and Maryland, the teams that are a few spots behind them, they have the opportunity to win, to beat better teams and win more high profile games that more people are watching. And, they're going to get more of a boost from beating a potentially ranked team or just a more respectable opponent and jump Penn State. So I could see a scenario where Penn State finishes 10-2 and things are looking good in those last couple of weeks. We just gradually see teams just jump them and Penn State starts to fall, even if they do win those last couple of games.
It's making me yearn for the days when we would end the season with Michigan State playing for that Land Grant Trophy. I miss those days.
The good old days. This is going to sound more confusing than I'm probably not going to explain my thought process very correctly. So apologies ahead of time. I'm more focused or more concerned with this season with like the process and the actual results. Like, okay, yes, I would absolutely love if Penn State made the playoff. One, I don't think this Penn State team is like going to win the national championship or even to make the playoff. So I don't greatly care if they sneak in as like out as the 11 seed or something like that. I want to see. Though. No, it definitely would be fun. But like, I'm trying to think of this like big picture wise. I always think back to like James in the beginning and like why in 2016 we were in that spot of, after losing the Pitt and after losing to Michigan and in the middle of halftime against Minnesota, like why was he on the hot seat? and you think back to the 2014, 2015 seasons, like the missed opportunities, like the biggest one that I always think of is Ohio State 2014. Like how different, like talk about like sliding doors moment. How different is the beginning of James Franklin's tenure if instead of, Akil Lynch trying to block Joey Bosa, they are able to block Joey Bosa with somebody that's actually capable of it. If Penn State throws a touchdown, they go for 2 and they win the game. One, you prevent Ohio State from winning the national championship because they ended up winning the national championship that year. And secondly, like I don't want to say it gets like the Ohio State monkey off of James Franklin's back because that's not necessarily the case, but having those types of victories early in a coach's tenure, I think are really, really important because not all wins are created equally. And again, I'm going to say this, I might as well get it tattooed on my forehead. Not to talk about James Franklin, but I think that was always one of the things that he kind of missed the boat with. Like beating Purdue versus beating Michigan is not the same for Matt Campbell. Like beating Michigan or beating USC or beating Washington is a lot different than beating Purdue or beating Minnesota or Northwestern, right? Like if you told me that Penn State, would you rather Penn State beat USC or Northwestern?
Well,
USC.
Yeah, right? Like that is what I mean when I talk about process. Like I want to see them going to big games and actually, pull an upset, win some of those big games. One of the absolute worst things for Penn State to happen this year, and this we'll see once the season comes, but it's to lose to USC, lose to Michigan, lose to Washington, and then beat all the teams that they're supposed to be in 9-3. Because it's like, oh, okay, we're right back where we started.
Yeah, or just get blown out by any of those teams or multiple of those teams because then, you say, well, we're not near the level we need to be. So you're not going to feel that great heading into the following season. Yeah.
So I just want some big games, big wins and big games, understanding that, okay, yeah, maybe they lose some stinker or two, but I think like overall, in like the grand scheme of things, looking at the big picture, I think that will be important because I think of like that, primetime whiteout game against USC, whether Penn State is undefeated or whether they had just lost Northwestern or they lost Wisconsin, like winning that game in front of, 110,000 people or whatever the capacity is going to be this year in the whiteout in primetime, like that will get you a lot of goodwill. So we'll see. We have a lot of time to talk about all this stuff though. Lots and lots of time to talk about it. So
I do want to add one quick note.
Yeah.
Just a piece of Penn State history that you alluded to earlier. You said you weren't certain about what happened Joe Paterno's first game. I just fact-checked it real quick because that was well before my time. They beat Maryland 15-7, so he did start off with a victory. However, the next 2 weeks, they lost to number 1 Michigan State 42-8, and they followed that up with an 11-0 victory. An 11-0 loss to Army, which I'm sure was not a fun game to watch.
11-8. I would love to know what the scoring was. Was that a safety, a field goal, or I guess a safety and 3 field goals? Was that?
I'm going to look at it. My guess is 3 field goals and a safety.
Yeah,
interesting. That's just my guess.
Maybe we'll do that for a rewatch. Who knows? Tim, what's going on with Penn State basketball? We'll close out for the next couple of months with 2 minutes with Tim in the basketball corner. What is going on with basketball? That sounds like a threat. Because it is.
Yeah,
basketball, dude.
I regret to inform you that they're still looking for their first Big Ten win. They are the only team in the Big Ten that is winless in conference play. They got trounced last week or a week ago maybe 10 days ago now at fellow basement dweller Maryland. They played Ohio State kind of tough. Well, they got down big in the first half. The defense just leaked like a sieve per usual. They managed to come back though. Got to a 1-point game like half of the second half, but then Ohio State just put their foot back on the gas pedal and was able to keep some distance between them for most of the rest of the game. They do play Northwestern tomorrow night. That's Thursday night, the 29th, as of this recording. Northwestern's also struggling. They're 1-8 in the conference, so it is on the road, but there's a opportunity perhaps to finally get one in the win column.
Where are we at on the just this being Mike Rhodes' last year. I know the buyout is probably a big piece of that because it's, I believe, $9 million, which, okay, not that big for a football program, but for a basketball program that has historically been really bad and terrible, that's a big chunk of change. So, what's the? I was gonna say like DEFCON.
It also depends. I don't know if that's a lump sum $9 million or if it's like with Franklin where it's paid out over several years. That.
On a scale of 1 to 5, where are you at on the Mike Rhodes needs to be or should be fired? 5 being like get him the hell out of here. 1 being he's going to be back.
I mean, I'm probably at a 4 at this point, and I hate to say it because Mike Rhodes seems like a good guy. I like the hire.
Is that do you think, or do like is that your personal?
Like what I want.
I'm saying, what do you think will actually happen?
Oh, what I think will actually, I mean, I'll put it at a 3 because I feel like it can go either way. Like if they had a couple of wins by now in conference play, then I think he'd be safe at least for till next year. But I mean, the possibility of going winless in the Big Ten is on the table, even though I do think just by law of averages, they should be able to get a couple wins down the stretch. But, man, it's just hard to have much hope. I know, yeah, Caden Mingo, he's freshman, he's got a lot of talent. And I know his brother delayed his commitment date. He was supposed to commit last week, and the crystal balls had him going to Baylor. But supposedly Penn State might still be in the hunt. I know UNC – North Carolina's also firmly in the mix, so we'll see.
I mean, matter though in college basketball at this point. Like
I mean, but you know what? That if Dylan doesn't go to Penn State, I would be very shocked if Caden is still a Nittany Lion after this year. I think he's going to go where his brother ends up.
I just I think of what it probably being that he's a consensus top 5 prospect in his class, like what it's going to take to get him. And I think back to the Rutgers team last year that had Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, 2 guys who were Ace Bailey was the 5th pick in the draft.
That's a good point too. I mean,
and they
2 top 5 lottery picks and they still put on a losing record. I mean, that's pretty impressive, I got to say.
Well, I don't even think it's it's definitely like an LL Rutgers thing. And this is probably a conversation for a different time. This is a larger conversation about the state of college basketball. But I just don't know if the recipe to success nowadays in college basketball, and this sucks to say, is to actually have college age athletes. It's not having a 19-year-old and 20-year-old be your 2 best players.
You know what, Pat? I mean, this brings my next point. I feel like you just got to get, I don't know, have like the NIL commitment to just go grab a bunch of like talented portal players. The Indiana model, like go find the basketball version of Kurt Signetti and just do whatever you can to hire him and, let him go to work, see what happens.
Yeah. I just think
I'm out of ideas at this point, Pat.
I just think that Penn State needs to get creative and Rhodes Mike Rhodes is not a bad basketball coach. He proved that at VCU, which I understand VCU has some built-in advantages, is probably the best A10 job. But even when he was at Rice, he did a really good job at Rice, which is traditionally not a good basketball program at all. I don't.
He won 25 games one season at Rice, it's Rice basketball. I mean, to win that many games in a season over there is 23. He won 23-12 his last season at Rice, and
I just don't think that Mike Rhodes, the way that he coaches and the way that he builds his programs at this point, with how college basketball has drastically changed in the last 3 years, is what's going to work. And that's, being defensive minded. I think they need to get someone that's offensive minded. That's Absolutely. How he operates in the portal. And that's how he operates even with high school recruiting. High school recruiting just doesn't matter. Remember last year when they signed Miles Goodman, he was like, oh, this is behind Tony Cora, second most talented. Do you know where Miles Goodman's at right now?
He's at some low major program, I think.
Sorry, I have to look it up because I want to make sure I get this right. Yes, UT Arlington. I can't remember if it was
Yes.
UT Rio Grande.
It was
or
some low major program.
UT Arlington. There's just no point, especially for Penn State basketball. Like, there's no point to recruit high school. Like, it should all be portal. It should all be guys that are like 23. It should all be Europeans. Like, look at what like Illinois is doing with all the Europeans that are like old. Like, that is what should be done. So until the NCAA like changes stuff, like, I don't know, if Penn State basketball wants to win, you got to be different and you got to be on the cutting edge of stuff and trying
to be fair, Pat, they did try the European route and
the bad ones.
And
I'm pretty sure they're younger guys too.
Yeah, a couple of them, I guess. I wouldn't mind. I think Melly Tunja and Von Urich have promise. But yeah, the other two, not so much.
Look at this. Shout out Jeffrey Mosher. So the 11 points in that in Joe Paterno's second loss, I guess that was. It was a touchdown, 2-point conversion, and a field goal.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
A night game in 1966. Interesting. I guess it makes sense.
Research, Jeffrey.
Army was, back in the 60s, one of the powers back then. So I guess they had lights and stuff like that. Interesting. All right, that's what we got. Tim, maybe you and I will do like a basketball only podcast at some point, especially if we do get to the point of where it becomes more of a reality that Rhodes is fair. Because I do have some basketball takes. Basketball is actually my favorite sport. I
would love to have done some more basketball shows, but just the team being as putrid as it is just kill my motivation to.
Yeah, I don't think we'd have much of an audience for basketball. So anyway, thank you guys for joining. We will not be back until we're going to take the next, again, off season, guys. We don't have a ton to talk about and don't want to be here and just be repetitive. So we will not be back until February 11th. After that will be the show for that will be recruiting focused. Penn State will have just officially signed their class. So we'll be on to discuss the 2026 recruiting class that Penn State brings in. So once again, that'll be February 11th next time we come back. And by then we'll have our whole off-season schedule finalized and figured out. So we'll share more with you then when we get the chance. So
and hopefully we will be well over the 700 subscriber mark, which we are this close to reaching, folks. I see 70 are watching us right now as we're signing off. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe.
Yes, please subscribe to the channel, like the videos. Until next time, we will see you later.